Like, I like your cut.
No, that'd be fit. I do like your fit too.
Ah.
So my hoodie?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the cut of your jib. You know? You ever hear that?
Yeah, for sure.
I have, yeah. That's what all of the kids said in 1933.
Yeah.
Guys, look what I've been looking into. We don't have a case, but I've been really researching. It's awesome. I've been doing lots of research. Don't you guys want to hear about it?
Yeah, I'm bored of Starfield, so let's do something different.
Okay. Rick doesn't answer. He doesn't want to hear it at all.
No, I want to hear it.
Okay.
This is also, yeah, I'm more into this than
Let me guess,
Starfield.
it's Spider-Man 2.
I don't have a PlayStation,
Oh,
but maybe I'll buy one for the company.
yeah. Yeah, why don't we have a company PS5?
Because I hate PlayStation. Okay, we're still in our like I did lots of research on Eliot Ness, and I just got down a deep dark rabbit hole of Al Capone, and then it's part 2 of our 3-part series on Eliot Ness, Al Capone, and the Cleveland Torso murders.
An elite team of private detectives.
What if balloons are aliens? Maybe that's the key component we're missing.
Cover-ups.
John's guilty.
Mysteries that need to be solved.
Maybe Mormons need mountains.
Richard, shut up.
Do you guys remember anything about Eliot Ness at all? I knew that you guys called it before. I'm just curious if you guys remember anything.
Yeah, he like haunted a lake in Scotland or something.
Yeah. He transmorphed into a giant dinosaur creature.
Yeah, thought so.
How did you remember that so well? Good job.
It's like a steel trap up here, pal.
Yeah, I can tell. Do you remember anything, Rick, besides the...
No, you just said that name and I completely blanked. No idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the overarching thing.
I think that's part of his thing. It's why you can never get like a clear photo of him and stuff. And all like the pictures, he's really blurry.
It's like he sprays some sort of venom at you or whatever and makes you forget. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about America's most and first famous mobster, Al Capone. Now, what do you guys know about Al Capone from pop culture? You must know some stuff about Al Capone, at least.
His favorite gun was a Tommy gun.
Okay, that's a good thing to remember about him.
He starred in the film Scarface and also Carlito's Way and later Heat.
Yeah, the actor De Niro definitely played Al Capone. I think he played him just once in
Oh, I thought we were talking about Al Pacino.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, it's Al Capone.
Ah.
Yeah.
But
well,
I thought Al Pacino was Scarface.
Pacino was Scarface, but they called it Scarface, which I found weird, but he was like a Cuban guy, right? Like, wasn't that movie like with a Cuban coke dealer?
No, Al Pacino's Italian.
I know they made him play a Cuban though. Today he would have been canceled for that shit. Are you playing? Do you have Cuban face on right now? You're canceled. Okay, well, that's all you guys know. Just the Tommy gun, and he's a famous actor that you misheard the name of. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do you actually know nothing about him?
I know very little.
I do. I've watched some. I mean, mostly fictional things that were inspired by true events, but also I went to Alcatraz when I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was cool.
That would
I drove by Alcatraz a couple weeks ago.
That was
Not even kidding.
much
Not even being a dick. Seriously.
like right to it. Like, did you get in the boat and just get?
No.
right
I didn't
beside
try
it?
and go. There's just a bridge that runs parallel to it, and I just so happened to be going over that bridge to get to an airport.
Cool. Well, that's good. So you didn't learn anything about Al Capone though doing that.
No, but actually, while I was going over that bridge, I added the movie Alcatraz to my watch list, and then I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay, good.
So I'm like kind of there.
Yeah, I was thinking of The Rock.
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Honestly, I barely remember what I added to my watch list. I can pull it up, and if you want to run down on my full watch list, I can give you
The Rock is a really good documentary about Alcatraz.
Yes, The Rock. The Rock is a very good documentary about Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Sean Connery is really good in it.
Yeah, I didn't know he was in prison. I don't know how he did all those movies being in prison.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys had no clue he died of syphilis. You did know that? Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yes, I did know he died of syphilis.
Okay. Well, since the Eliot Ness episode, he went to jail for tax evasion, not for gangster stuff. Did you guys ever hear of the St. Valentine's Day massacre?
Yes. Did we not talk about that? I must have heard that from something else.
We talked about it for a second, but it's more of a Capone thing, so I kind of left it for this episode.
Yes, I do know about that though.
Okay. He's so riddled in pop culture. I'm curious since I went a deep dive, I know like way too much about him, but I'm just curious what people just generically know nowadays kind of thing. So that's pretty much the basic things that,
Yeah, I think we learned a little bit about it in school.
well, believe it or not, they actually teach his method of being a gangster at Harvard Business School because he like revamped how like money laundering and all that kind of shit happens. He's actually like,
Yeah, that sounds like
revolutionary.
American capitalism.
Yeah, for sure. I try to like think of why he's so famous, and it's just because he is American. He's so American, it's unreal. Like, just take what
Yeah.
you want, kill whoever gets in your way,
Right.
and laugh while you're doing it.
And even more American is for the federal government to see what you're doing and go, he can't do that because we want to do that. Let's
Yeah,
stop him from doing
exactly.
that and then find a way to gaslight the public into letting us do that.
Well, and that's the other part that I was going to say. Like, he was also like so anti-American at the same time because he was so against the government
Yep.
trying to tell him what to do, right? So he has that. Anyways, let's dig into Alphonse Capone. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, January 17th, 1899. Now, it's important here for me to tell you that even though his ancestry says that he's Italian, Capone was American. He even gets mad about it a bunch in his life when people say, "You're an Italian." He's like, "I'm American. I'm not Italian. I was born in Brooklyn."
Yo, I love that.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys that would like hire, we'll talk about it later, but he'd hired like Irish people, Irish and Italian people in the early 1900s fucking hated each other. He would hire black people, loved jazz music. He like, I didn't write this in the script, and I might as well just bring it up now. He like kidnapped a bunch of jazz musicians at one point for his birthday and made them play for like 3 days straight at his thing. None of them wanted to come. He like kidnapped them to play, and they played for 3 days fucking
Fuck.
straight. Yeah. He's friends
All
with
right,
Louis Armstrong.
I don't like the kidnap part, but do I love Al Capone?
You might,
Like,
you might. Al Capone's kind of
he
cool.
kind of fucking rocks. Like,
That's what he wanted.
I feel like you could probably love him now and not get canceled. I feel like
No,
he'd be
his
all right.
he has a bunch of family members, like great grandkids that still live, and the grandparents and the the grandparents and the parents of these great grandkids all had a hard time with the Capone last name, but now the new generation like brags about him being there because he's so cool now. He's like so far removed from being like the murderous piece of shit that he was that it's cool to be related to him.
well, also like the severity of the thing you have to do to get canceled increases with how low your status is in the world. Cause like it's not like yeah, like when you're a celebrity and like you like say a slur or something, like yeah, you lose your career. But like if you just like work at McDonald's and you say the N-word, you just work at McDonald's. Like the thing you have to do to get canceled from like working in like retail or fast food is just like actual crime, which is then just that's not being canceled, that's just getting arrested and going to jail.
Actually, now that you say that, I'd love to see like the chart that shows how many more slurs are said by like different fame of people, right? So like now do you see a decrease in celebrities, but just like a complete increase in McDonald's workers?
Like, and like don't get me wrong, like they for sure say it. Like nobody has a face that says like they relish racial slurs more than Chris Pratt, but like they just hide it, you know what I mean? Like as long as they don't get publicly ousted for it, like it's fine. He can't even like be honest about the fact that he's fucking like, you know, he's like a fucking MAGA guy too. Like he, and, you know, like he keeps that under wraps. So like you can't be honest about who you vote for when you're like in that level of position. But like you have to like throw the hot fryer oil on one of your coworkers to get removed from.
There's like, okay, this is like side tangent a little bit. I like focus for a second, but like I think there's a weird thing where some people just can't get canceled either, though. It doesn't matter how famous you are. Like, think about Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was a convicted rapist, and he's like one of the most famous people in the world. People love him.
Yeah.
Literally a fucking rapist in the 90s. Like, how does that guy not canceled at all? Louis C.K. blocked a girl into a room and jerked off in front of them. He's
It's like
definitely
the thing you did had to come out during the movement of like the zeitgeist into being like that,
Right.
not fucking cool. Like if it happened before that, it's like it's weirdly like implicitly like not forgiven because like I agree with you. Like don't like here's the thing. Like I don't respect anybody who's famous or rich. Like I don't think I've ever been shy about that. Like I love Tom Cruise movies. Like I'll watch him in anything, but like I wouldn't help him if he was like teetering off of a ledge. Like I would just watch that happen.
He does his own stunts, so he'd probably do that. You'd probably just be ruining one of his takes if you did that. Be like,
Well,
"Why'd you
good,
save
I'll
me?
just-
I was trying to fucking land."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like if you were anti-Semitic on Twitter last week, you're canceled. But if you were in the 1940s, America kind of just looked the other way, you know?
But yeah, they hired you to make fucking bombs for him and create NASA.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, is Canada canceled? Because like 2 weeks ago, we applauded a Nazi in our parliament. So yeah, so Capone said he's not American. He was the fourth born of 9 kids, but the first to actually be conceived in America. He liked to talk about this all the time. Back in Italy, his father, Gabriella Capone. They kept saying that in the fucking. Anyways, Gabriel.
Gabriella.
They kept giving him an Italian accent every time they said his name. I was listening to a bunch of different things. I listened to an audiobook on this one, and the guy would just like super monotone the whole time, except for when he said the Italian names, he would throw an Italian accent. I was like dying. It would make me laugh every time. Back in Italy, his father, Gabriella Capone, was a baker specializing in making pasta. Gabriella and his wife Teresa and their 2 sons, Vincenzo and Raffaele, moved to America from Italy in 1893. Vincenzo, or James, or Jimmy as he called himself as a kid, really loved cowboy movies. I just love that. That's like like why.
Dude, that's the most Italian American thing in the world, and it drives me fucking nuts.
Oh man.
Everyone in my family was like that. Like it was always like it took talking about food for them to know how to speak Italian. Like
I do love how you hate your Italian heritage.
Because I'm sure it'll bubble back up.
I was gonna say, well, I'll keep poking the bear as this goes through. So yeah, Vincenzo used to call himself James or Jimmy. They gave themselves all American names as soon as they got here. They love being American.
He went from Vincenzo to James, not like Vincent.
No, he went to James. And don't worry, he even changed it even more. He loved cowboy movies. He was like right into them. So he left home at the age of 16, which wasn't super rare in the early 1900s, honestly. But he went to Hollywood to become a cowboy actor. That's what that guy left for.
So it's James.
It's Jimmy, thank you.
Raphael, Mom, I told you it's Mark.
Raphael actually changes to Ralph. He does. He's good. Raphael is one of the brothers.
Of course. They're fucking Ninja Turtles.
So yeah, I'm just gonna spoil like Jimmy's life early because he's not really in Al's life at all, but he does have a funny story, which I find amazing. So first of all, he left home, pursue acting, didn't make it to Hollywood though. He got as far as Home, Nebraska. And when he got to Home, Nebraska, he changed his name to Richard Hart. Now, Hart, the reason he changed to Hart is that was the last name of William S. Hart, his favorite cowboy actor growing up. He went there. He's like, oh, I like this place. I'm going to stay. I'm Richard Hart now. And then he went to World War I. And he went back to home, and then he became the sheriff, came back to the little small town. I'm the sheriff now. And then Richard Hart got the nickname Two Gun Hart because of all the successful raids against bootleggers and his aptitude for shooting. He became a federal prohibition agent during the 20s and 30s,
nice.
Which is fucking hilarious because his brother was the biggest bootlegger of all time.
Yeah.
I don't know if that surprises me. Kind of feels like that's how corruption works.
But no, he didn't know him. They didn't know. Like Al Capone was way younger. He didn't even know he was alive until later in his life. Yeah, he like disappeared. I think it's awesome. I hope like he like came back to the family like I don't know. He was washed up and broke. Like by the time he came back, he just heard about Al and went there like I need money, you know. But by the time he got there, Al was already like broken from syphilis. He already had like brain damage from it. He had like the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. So he didn't even really understand that his big brother was back. So I just wonder, I think it's awesome. Like, I wonder if Eliot Ness tried to recruit Richard Hart because, he's trying to recruit from all over the country, the best, the brightest. I wonder if he tried to get Richard Hart to join the Untouchables. Because that would have been fucking awesome if he was like, hey, wait, we're getting Al? Like, that would be great.
That would be some serious fucking like, oh, yo, have you ever seen The Proposition? That's kind of the plot of The Proposition, where it's like he's got to go after like his brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. I'll watch it, on the list.
Oh, that movie's fucking sick. Yeah, watch that movie.
Gabriella and Teresa's third son, Salvatore, was, or Frank, as he called himself in later life, was conceived in Italy, but born not long after landing in America. Teresa and Gabriella had 5 more kids after Al. Ermina Capone, who died at the age of 1 from meningitis, was girl, Ermina, and then Ermino Capone, which he went by John. But they just named the guy and the girl Ermina and Ermino. I just find that fun. Albert Capone. So once they started having kids in America, they just gave them American names. Albert, Matthew Capone, and Mafalda Capone, who was the youngest daughter. Both Ralph and John remained a part of Capone's life in the criminal business. The others went their own ways. Albert, like one of his other brothers, just disappeared from their life, and no one ever knew he existed until he was like 95 when he died. John and Matthew both stayed in Al's life, but not in a crime way. They were just like Al was basically their dad. And Mafalda was Capone's baby sister, and she lived with him and his mother until his and her death.
Wait, I'm sorry. What was Al Capone's real name?
Alphonse.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I was so confused. I was like, wait.
Yeah, he had another brother named Albert, which I find hilarious too. They're just like,
no,
we're running out of names here.
Yeah. Ermino, Alfonso, Albert,
Ralphie,
Davido.
Mafalda. Okay, so Mafalda, I'm just going to spoil a little bit of her. She was short and stocky woman that when she got married, she was like, people called her ugly, which I loved. They just don't even care. She was an ugly lady. But when she got married, people were shocked and assumed she was married off in some mafia deal, like some fucking marrying a princess off to the king of the land over. I fucking love that.
Wow.
Anyways, we'll talk more about the family as we go, but Ralph and Frank are the two that are in the story the most. So Gabriel was said to have an advantage above most immigrants when he came to America because he could read and write in English. When he arrived in America, super poor, he had to give up his baking because he didn't have any money to open up a shop in New York City. So he had to reinvent himself in his 30s as a barber. He'd also do some sort of like some day labor from time to time when his chair wasn't full at the barber shop. Gabriella eventually earned enough money to buy a building and open up his own barbershop, and the family moved upstairs to that. Teresa was a seamstress and mostly did work from the apartment above the family's barbershop. Al was a good student. He wasn't a great student. He was a B student, but school didn't last long for Alphonse. He quit school at the age of 14 because he had a disagreement with one of his teachers. And that's how like a couple historians put it. And there's a couple different stories how this goes. So one story is like this. I guess some boy in his class stole his lunch and Al wanted it back, and he was disrupting the class by trying to fight the kid. The first story is the teacher makes him stand in the corner for disrupting the class. And then Al goes, fuck this, I'm out of school. I never came back. Okay, sure. That one's the nice story. The other story goes that the argument goes a little bit further, and instead of Al getting put in the corner, he starts to throw fists at the thief kid. And when the teacher comes to break up the fighting boys, Al punched his teacher in the head by accident.
Nice.
Yeah, so Al gets kicked out of school for that. I'm assuming that's the real story because of what I know about Al Capone now, but maybe not.
Can I share something real quick?
Sure.
So I looked up Mafalda Capone to just see if she was as unsavory as people were saying, and
Yeah.
she's not. I don't get the hate, but look at the fucking guy she married. Do you see those goddamn eyebrows?
Those aren't eyebrows. Those are
What the
fucking-
fuck is that? Like, this is her. Like, she just looks like an Italian woman.
okay. This is her wedding photos. Go find more photos of Mafalda.
You can't. It's just her wedding photos. She looks
There's-
fine.
There's a couple more, and she's like,
Which ones? Like when she's old? Like this is when she's old. Like she's just like a middle-aged woman there. But like that's not even bad. Like it's grainy as shit.
yeah.
But like That is an average-looking woman.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with those pictures.
Also, an average-looking Italian woman. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, but an average-looking
Yeah,
Italian
most
woman's like a
is ugly.
2 to
Is
every
ugly.
other.
I'm not going there. I didn't say that.
You said average-looking Italian woman. You might as well call her
I
ugly.
feel bad for Italian women. It's Italian men I hate.
Whatever. A beauty's the eye of the beholder. Plus, like, beauty standards were different in the 20s. She could be beautiful now and like look like a fucking pile of horse shit back then. Like, if you look at like Miss USA from 1925, she's got fucking horse face. Like, it's not beauty standards change.
No, I know it does shift, dude. We were watching rewatching The Shining last night, and that photo in the end from 1920s.
Yeah.
Everyone in that is so fucking ugly. It's crazy. So it's just funny you brought that up because, like, go and look up that photo from the end of The Shining, and it is just the most unflattering picture. It's like, I think it's actually from the 20s because, like,
it is. They just photoshopped his face into it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because, like, god damn.
Well, I'm sorry, Mafalda. I didn't mean to trash you. I'm just repeating what people say. I don't really know.
He feels mafawful about it.
Yeah, I definitely do. Al quit school. He never regretted quitting school. He always said he learned more on the streets than he ever did in school. But he did know, he was smart enough to know the importance of education. He always forced his brother Matt, John, and Mafalda to finish school and not get into his business. So Al was a big kid, always a big person, even for his age. When he was like 14, 15, he was a tough kid. And he had a reputation of being a good fighter. He would always fight kids in the neighborhood, and he they say he always won, but I doubt he always won, but I'm sure he won most of his fights. He's a big boy. Al's brothers were also big and tough kids. Frank and Ralph both joined gangs early on as kids. All three of them did, I guess. Ralph was the tough guy, and Frank was the smart one, and they said Al was both of those. He was smart and tough. Now, let me skip ahead with Ralph a bit, just because it's a fun story and I didn't know where to put it. So Frank didn't have any children, but Ralph did. Ralph had one child, Ralph Jr. Everyone called him Ralphie. Ralph Sr. had a much better nickname. His nickname was Bottles. So Ralph's nickname was Bottles because of the bottling factory. He would work at the bottling factory. So, all right. So that was just when Ralph was older. As a kid, he wasn't called Bottles, but I might call him Bottles a couple times because I like it more. So let's go back to them being kids. So Al was so big that at like 15, 16, he used to fake his age, telling him he was older. One of the fun things he used to like to do was he'd go to the pier and he'd egg on Navy men that are getting off their ships. And he'd want to fight them. He's like, come on, you little bitch. He'd fight the Navy guys. And apparently they were twice his age, and Al won most of his fights. So I don't know. I guess that's a fun thing to do when you're 1920s kid.
How big are we talking? Because I looked up his height, because he looks like a short guy, but like
he's talking. I think he's 6'3", but like back then that's huge.
I'm just gonna bust in here for a couple seconds and tell you he was 5'10", and I'm dumb.
Really? I saw like 3 different heights. I saw 5'9", 5'11", and now you just said 6'3".
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was in the 6'1". I think it's 6'3". It comes up. I wrote it down later.
All right.
His cardboard cutout is definitely 6'3" that I'm looking at right now. Some lady's measuring it. But
after Al was kicked out of school, he got a bunch of odd jobs, and jobs which he gave paychecks to his parents to help around the house. And haircuts, I guess, don't pay for like 10 people. I don't know. That, and Gabriella was always sick, and he couldn't always work. He was a sickly man. So Al got a job as a box cutter, a pin boy at a bowling alley. He worked behind the counter at a candy store and at a munitions factory, which, Jesus, they're just like, here, kid, make some bullets. Al also joined a street gang called the Boys of Navy Street.
Nice.
They all wore ascots and danced down the street together. Actually, the gang was just a bunch of kids, and they would all just sit around outside smoking cigarettes, trying to look scary. They did like minor robberies and stuff like that. Nothing too harsh. They were just trying to be tough. Like living in downtown New York with a bunch of immigrants coming in must have been a little ski, but I had to group up to be safe, you know?
Why?
Because people were fighting with each other all the time. Everyone was super racist. Like everyone hated Italians. Everyone hated Italians and Irish.
It just sounded like the immigrants were the problem. That was very interestingly worded. That's all.
What, to be safe, they had to group up. That's just what it is. There's a guy named Frank Nitti. He was the leader of the Boys of Navy Street. Later in life, Frank Nitti became Capone's #1 enforcer. It's just Nitti stayed with him his whole life. We'll talk about Nitti a little bit later. Nitti was like a decade older, so he was like 26 years old, gathering up the 16-year-olds around town, being like, let's form a gang, guys. The Boys of Navy Street were relatively harmless. All they were a bunch of Italian kids that would war with all the Irish boys in their neighborhood. Al was already fighting those kids anyway, so what was the difference? He's just now organized. And Gabriella saw Alphonse. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. Going down the criminal path with the Boys of Navy Street, or the Navy Street Boys. And he didn't really like the criminal element. He wanted him to make a fair living. So he decided to buy his son a shoe shining kit. He told him, go downtown to Union and Columbia Street under the clock, and there's going to be a lot of vendors there, and use that kit to make some money, which Al did. He took the shoe shining kit. He made a bunch of money. Gabriella tried to give Frank like a kit as well, which he did. But Frank wasn't as responsible as Al. Whatever money he made, he used to gamble to try to make more money, to which he would use to buy like fancy, nice suits. And then he just sold the kit eventually because he liked nice clothes. Gabriella hated that. He wanted him to earn money. Al loved that about Frank. Al loved that he used to dress like super nice. Al looked up to Frank a lot. He wanted to be a snazzy dresser. That's what we kept calling. They were snazzy dresses in the Times parlance. You're like, okay, snazzy dresser has to be said. So they were snazzy dress. Well, Frank was. Al wasn't. He just gave his money up. This is where I find Eliot Ness and Al Capone are similar. Remember, Eliot Ness worked at that suit shop, and he wanted to sell more suits than everybody else, and he wanted to dress fancy. So, like, Eliot Ness and Al Capone have a lot of similarities. This is just the first one that comes up. They like to dress fancy. Sorry, Al would bring all his money home to his parents because his dad, like I said. And this is also another way that Capone is similar to Ness. Ness was a mama's boy. Remember, he lived with his mom till he was like 27 when he got married, and then he moved out. Al Capone's mom lived with him and his family for most of his life, like pretty much the rest of his life. And he would call his mom every single day at the end of his workday, Al would, and then he'd call his wife. So he'd call his mom first and then his wife when he wasn't going to be home every day. So they're kind of like that too. So
little codependence going on.
For sure. That's like an Italian stereotype, right? Where their moms are like super special to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what makes the men so bad.
That's what makes the men so bad is their moms.
Yeah. I don't despise Italian women until they become mothers, and then they
I got you.
They churn out these monsters. I think they're God's gift to Earth.
So while Al's shining shoes, he notices a lot of things. Al's very smart. He really is. He notices the guys who could afford to get their shoes shined weren't typically the exhausted factory workers. These guys didn't work that hard. All these guys did, they went from vendor to vendor asking them for protection money. And they seemed like their lives were a lot better than the factory worker guys. So Al looked at them and he's like, I want to be like them. And he did. So as a shoe shiner, he figured out how to maximize profits. Al hired a few of his older, dumber friends and started doing what he saw the guys in the fancy shoes doing, but just to the other shoe shine kids in the same area. So he was shaking down the other shoe shine kids, being like, you want to keep shining shoes? Or we'll beat the fuck out of you if you don't give us half your profits.
Nice.
So yeah, he caught on pretty quick on how to extort people. They called them, that was basically a new gang that Al started, and they called themselves the South Side Rippers, which that sounds very menacing. All they were doing was holding up shoe shine boys.
Yeah, but did they earn that name? Did they rip up their underwear or something if they crossed them, or
we're rippering you off? While he's shining shoes, he also meets a guy, very influential guy in his life named Johnny Torrio. Torrio is one of the guys shaking down the vendors. Not fully known and understood by Capone yet, but Johnny Torrio was a mobster who had ties with many different shady operations in and around New York City, if not the Eastern United States. Capone decided to chat up this older man, and Torrio took a liking to the young Capone. By this time, Capone was 16, and the 33-year-old Torrio noticed the young man's size and offered him a job as a bouncer at his club. Point here, 33 years old is older than Capone was when he was arrested and put in jail. So Torrio had already lived basically what Capone lived, and he saw this kid and took him under his wing. Capone jumped on the opportunity thinking that maybe he could get a job like Mr. Torrio and one day get his shoes shined by some other kid on the street. Protection money was his bread and butter. Torrio got a job as a bouncer at the Harvard Inn, which is located in Brooklyn. This was owned by Torrio gangster boss, a guy named Frankie Yale. Yale named the Harvard Inn because of his last name was Yale. He's like, 2 Ivy League things going on right here. Super funny. I really enjoyed that like weird pun joke about your bar. Yale was this very successful gangster. Yale and Torrio saw the potential in young Capone and realized that he was very smart and could be used in that regard as well as his physical prowess. So Torrio starts using Capone to do his books as well as bounce in the evening. Capone was to be his protege. Capone loved the gangster lifestyle. He learned so much about crime from Torrio. Capone also learned a lot from Yale, but it wasn't the same stuff he learned from Torrio. Torrio was smart and solved problems with diplomacy, while Yale was a hothead and violence was the way he solved most of his problems. Al was picking up the usefulness of both violence and diplomacy at his young age. After working with Torrio for a few years, Capone knew he was right to look up to Torrio. Not only was Torrio well respected and feared on the streets, he had lots of money, and that's exactly what Al wanted. Al also liked Torrio because he was like Frank in a way. He was what people would call a snazzy dresser.
Southside Rippers represent.
You Googled Southside Rippers and that's what came up, and then you put it up.
This is someone's SoundCloud album.
Okay.
Yeah,
go check out
that
the
is
Southside
exactly.
Rippers on Southside.
Go check out Al.
Like.
You know what? I'm at the end of this. I'm going to play one of their songs. I don't think they're going to charge me. They're going to sue me at all.
No,
Uh,
probably not.
Southside represent. Southside
This track
Rippers.
was not found. Maybe it has been removed. All I got is the album cover. I don't.
Capone meets his soon-to-be wife while he's working at the box factory. He's working a job and he's also helping, like doing odd jobs for Torrio. Mary Josephine Coughlin was a timekeeper at the same factory. People just called her Mae, though. She was 2 years older than Capone. And even though later in life, her and Al used to lie and say that they were high school sweethearts, they were not. Mae got pregnant with Al much before they were married. They actually had their first kid, Albert Francis Capone. I shouldn't say first kid, their only kid, Albert Francis Capone, a.k.a. Sonny, 3 weeks before they were married. She was Irish, which was rare for an Italian and an Irish to marry at that time due to tensions between the two minority groups. Not to mention the premarital baby. They were lucky at all to even be able to get married in a Catholic church. This is another similarity to Ness. Okay. Ness wanted to have lots of kids, but he only had the one adopted one. So they only had one kid, but like they both had one kid. I just find it interesting. There's so many, they're on opposite sides of like the law, but so similar in so many ways. Al and Mae only had one kid because Mae actually gets syphilis from Al, and she says it made him sterile. And she had a few stillbirths, blame them on the syphilis too, which it probably was. Sonny got syphilis from Mae, and Sonny was sickly as a kid because of it. So Mae got hers cured when she started to get symptoms, and she did the same with the baby, the boy, the young man. I'll just talk about Mae and Sonny just a bit here. So Mae and Al loved each other and stayed together for his entire life, like right till he died. Through the syphilis, through the violence, through the legal troubles, through Alcatraz, even through later life mental health issues, Mae was always there for Al. Mae hated all his siblings. Mae hated his mom. The way Deirdre Bair in the book that I read was Capone, his life, legacy, and legend, describes it as she just put up with them. So like she just loved Al Capone.
What was their age gap?
2 years.
Surprising.
She was 2 years older, yeah.
She was older?
2 years older, yeah.
Interesting. Even more surprising.
Yeah. I find it kind of interesting that that's what Al Capone wanted to look like in the public as a family man, loving family man. And he actually really was. Like he actually had that in him. He was also a psychopath, but I mean, he just wanted everyone to see that, and he was, and it shows through his life. Mae put up with a lot for him.
Damn, it's too bad the position of tech CEO wasn't available that back then, because he probably would have really fit very neatly inside of that role.
For sure. If he would have been like in a different socioeconomic background, he would have been for sure a CEO of some major Fortune 500 company, for sure, 100%. no doubt in my mind. I just wanted to put that out there. Like, they were together the whole time. I'm not going to hammer down on their love through the whole thing. I just want people to understand that she stayed through everything. The syphilis. Imagine getting syphilis when there's no cure for syphilis. Your husband's out banging fucking hookers and stuff like that, and you're just like, whatever. That's my man.
It was probably like, hey, I'm gonna be your man, or I'm gonna fucking kill you.
No, it wasn't like that. I looked in to see if he was not like that with her. He like babied her. Like he was. It's really weird.
Gaslighting, Richard.
Okay, it's gas. Sure.
The OG gaslighter. Fuck yeah.
Okay, so there's another incident that happens to Capone that makes him who he was while he was still in New York City. This was just before he met Mae. One night while he's bouncing at the Harvard, Al told some woman that she had a nice ass, and her brother Frank Galluccio was there to defend his honor. Frank Galluccio slashed Capone's face 3 times with a broken bottle. I don't know if it's one swing with 3 slices from the broken bottle or if it was like 3 separate slices, but he had 3 giant scars on his face after. That's how he got the nickname Scarface, which he fucking hated.
What qualifies as a nice ass in 1929, especially when that was like the start of the Great Depression? They're just like, damn, look at that. It looks like a crisp, brand new book. Right off of the presses.
It's 1919, sorry, because he was born
1919.
1917, sorry, 1917.
17?
Damn, you ate the whole wheelbarrow of bread.
Yeah, and he got the nickname Scarface for having the scars on his face, but he fucking hated it. But Capone never actually got to get retribution for this, even when he was like head honcho later on in life, because in the mobster community, what Galluccio did was justified. Capone was disrespecting his sister, and Capone actually had to apologize for doing that, and he got what he deserved, and he had to live with the consequences of his actions. But he did hate the scars, so later in life, he would always like hide his face. If you ever look at Capone pictures, he's always like on a profile. Like most times, you don't ever really see the scars. And even later in life, like he would get powders and creams and shit to cover it up so no one would be able to see what he was. And if you called Capone Scarface when he was head honcho in Chicago, you were dead. He would kill you or he would fuck you up. Like, you did not call him that to his face. In the papers, they would do it. Like, they would call him Capone Scarface, and he would find the fucking like person who wrote the article and beat the shit out of them. Like, don't call him Scarface. Until he was in jail. Once he was in jail, it was all Scarface Al, like every article.
Nice.
Yeah.
Earlier,
some dude with 2 broken arms at a typewriter. Big, dumb, bitchy, Scarface, Scary, hatchet, fucking mug, motherfucker goes to jail.
Just like 100 adjectives making fun of him.
He's just smiling but missing a bunch of teeth. Gotcha, bitch.
Yeah, it's one of those neck brace things. Back in, we'll go a little bit back in time here. So 1908, years before he met Capone, Torrio was asked by a colleague in Chicago to run protection against the Black Hand. The Black Hand was just like another gangster organization. They would just threaten people with letters, which I found hilarious. They'd send you a letter like, give us money or we kill your family.
Did it have like a Black Hand insignia on it? Like what, like from the Dark Brotherhood?
I don't know if they had if they actually, I couldn't find any letters. I was looking to read one so I could laugh at it, but they just describe it. I don't know. They didn't really say there's any insignias. I wish I did know.
Wasn't the Black Hand something in The Godfather too?
Could be. They're pretty big. Like, they're from from Italy, and they would come over, and they were scary. They were scary people because of reputation. Yeah. You know, this other guy, Vincenzo Big Jim Colissimo, he had owned over 100 brothels in Chicago, and he was getting extorted by these people. So he called his New York friends and said, can you send some muscle? We're getting fucked up here by the Black Hand. So they send over Torrio. Torrio would make trips down to Chicago to help out. And then apparently in the first couple months in Chicago, Torrio had killed 10 Black Hand members and basically just taken over a South Side gang and run protection for Big Jim's brothels. So it took him 2 months to get a handle on that. So Torrio was like now spending a lot of his time going between Chicago and New York. When he met Al Capone, he was like half in between both cities. So much of this time, Al's bouncing at the Harvard, Torrio's making his way back and forth to Chicago to take care of his operations there. In 1919, Torrio calls up his buddy and protege Capone to come join him. Capone's 19 at the time. This is like a major fork in the road for Capone. He had a wife and he had a kid. Gabriella just died recently enough, a couple months prior to this, and Capone needed to make money. He was now the breadwinner around the family. Frank was just spending all his money on clothes. Ralph was younger. Jimmy was off trying to be a cowboy, and all the other kids were just young. So he felt a big responsibility to take care of everyone. And he had another job lined up before Torrio called. He was going to move to Baltimore to take up an honest job bookkeeping. But Torrio added a zero to his wage, and Capone saw dollar signs, and he headed down to Chicago to be with his mentor. I don't know. This is when he goes down there. He starts without the family. He goes down there just by himself to get started. Torrio has him bouncing at one of the mob establishments at 2222 South Wabash Street. The bar was called the Four Deuces because of the address. Capone had been in Chicago, was there doing that. He'd been in Chicago for about a year. And in 1920, Prohibition was made into law. Torrio saw Chicago as a great town for the mob to get into the alcohol business. The mayor at the time, his name was William Hale Thompson, Big Bill. So now we have a Big Bill and a Big Jim. Big Bill Thompson was considered a wet, meaning that he didn't agree with prohibition laws. And with that came an opportunity for the mob to bribe the mayor and make some serious cash. All you have to do is just look the other way. Once they start that, the cash starts rolling in pretty quick, and Capone is basically second in command under Torrio when he gets there. Like, he's only 20 years old, and he starts to run his life a lot different. Are you putting up the Four Deuces for us?
Yeah. As long as we're all okay with buying a minimum of a $3 drink each, we'll get early seating. And when we get early seating, it means that since we're going to be sitting first, we'll get to order our 4-course meal first.
That sounds like Al Capone's kind of place.
No, that's worth relapsing over. Yeah.
4-course meal? Ruin my life? Why not?
Sure.
Holy shit, tickets are $80 to go to a bar.
Capone's got shit tons of money now working at the Four Deuces. He starts buying fancy suits. He had like a completely yellow one, like Dick Tracy yellow, that he wore only on Saturdays or something. He had like chartreuse ones. He had bright blue ones, always double-breasted because he thought it made him look skinnier, look thinner because he was a big boy. He was such a well-dressed man that he earned a new nickname that he liked while he was in Chicago when they called him Snorky, which means well-dressed man. Snorky. Isn't that a great name? Come on.
I feel like that meant something else.
Like what?
It sounds like something, homosexual.
Okay.
Yeah. He overheard it, and they're like, look at that fucking yellow suit. Look, he's looking a little snorky today. And he's like, comes up behind him. He's like, what's that mean? And they're like, it just means you're so well dressed, Al. And they're just sweating. And he's like, oh, cool. More and more vibrant until he's Steve Harvey.
Until he's Steve Harvey? Okay. Actually, that would be a good way to describe him. Steve Harvey-esque, dressing like that. Yeah, I looked up Snorky when I first looked it up, and it came up. Did you watch that horror movie, the Banana Splits movie?
No, I haven't seen it, but I know what it is.
Yeah, the elephant's called Snorky in that. Anyways, the movie's good, by the way.
Is it really?
It's like so campy. It's amazing. I like
that. See, the Banana Splits creep me out by themselves. So
yeah. It was well done. It was very well done. I was like, this is so bad, and then I kept going like, more. Give me more of this movie. Okay, so he's Snorky now. Even though Al was making tons of money with Torrio, bouncing and bartending at the Four Deuces wasn't good for him. There's a lot of sex work going on at the club, and Al would frequent the sex workers. Now, he didn't consider this cheating on Mae, more like testing the product is how he kind of described it. And this is where he contracts syphilis. In a city alone, 19 years old, being surrounded by brothel girls. This was just too much for Capone to resist. He wasn't careful, so he got syphilis, and he didn't treat it. He just let the symptoms come, and then eventually they go away, and he thought it was gone.
So like back then, how hard was it to figure out that you had syphilis? Like, what's the process? I don't even know what the process is. Is it something that like shows up, or
I think you get like fevers and chills and stuff like that. If you go to the doctor, they'd be able to test you pretty quick. You'd be sick,
Oh,
right?
you'd feel it.
You'd feel it for sure. And you'd go to the doctor and the doctor would be like, oh, you've got syphilis, young man. And then they give you that mercury shit, that salvarsan stuff we talked about last episode. And then you'd be sick for another month and then it would go away. And you just kill it off.
That's cool.
But no, he just decided, no, we'll just tough through it. And then it just kind of went away. The symptoms went away and he just never really thought about it. I'm sure his wife told him about it a bunch. There's a whole lot of rumors about how he was scared of needles. I don't think that's true because later in life he has to get needles all the fucking time. And there's no like parts of hearing about him like freaking out because he saw needles ever. Only that that's the only reason he didn't go get cured is because he was scared of needles. I just think he was like, I'm not sick, I'm a man, and it just kept fucking.
Yeah, but also maybe at that point the needle fear part of his brain had completely liquefied and rotted away.
That's true too. That could be it for sure. Yeah, so in the years to come, Capone moves the family to Chicago. Capone buys a house in the suburbs for them to live. This is the only time where Capone is not flashy. He just wanted a nice little suburban home that he bought for $5,500, which was kind of expensive back then, but it was kind of average for a lot of people. It was just an average house.
Just a nice, understated, not at all snorky house with bright yellow paint and a giant feather on top and a double-breasted door. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, no, not. It's kind of average. Honestly, you could look it up. It would be awesome if it was super yellow. That'd be great. Like Dick Tracy.
I call this the Saturday house.
Well, hey, you know what? You're kind of not wrong. Later in 1920, Torrio makes a move and he decides that Big Jim has to go because Big Jim doesn't want to get into the alcohol business and he's fucking up our money, our profits here. So he kills Big Jim in his own restaurant. Torrio calls up Big Jim, told him that there's a shipment coming and he needs to be there. A shipment of alcohol, you got to be at the restaurant. Big Jim shows up, gets shot. Rumor has it that they called Frank Yale, their buddy from New York City, to come down and do the deed himself for Torrio and Capone. From that point on, Torrio's in charge of the Chicago outfit, which is the big gang. It's not even the biggest gang. It's one of the gangs that's in Chicago at the time. There was just one of many. And since alcohol was the new means to make money, all the gangs fought like constantly. It was called the Chicago Beer Wars, and it lasted pretty much as long as Prohibition did. So with the mayor being a wet, they were going to make a killing. They just had to convince him to look the other way, which he did. And it was all money and violence for Torrio and Capone until 1923. Torrio preferred no violence, but I mean, the money was good and everyone fought over it. So whatever. 1923, they elected a new mayor of Chicago, set on reforming the corruption. His name was William Even. It's Even. Is that Evan just a spelt weird, or is it even? William Even Deaver.
I think it's pronounced Gabriella.
Gabriella, yeah. Evan. Mayor Deaver was opposed to prohibition, but he ran a campaign on reform. So he threatened all the criminals with reform. Like, I'm going to change the police. We're going to get rid of corruption. You guys are done here. So Torrio didn't like this threat. And instead of just going out to kill the mayor to like continue, he used his brain. He did a different plan. He thought to himself, the cops are going to be all up my ass in Chicago for bootlegging, and all over the other gangs are just going to keep fighting us for our bootlegging money. Fine. I'm just going to move my operation to Cicero, which is a suburb nearby where they have a different police department and an easier government to corrupt. And that's what they did. They bought a hotel called the Hawthorne, set up operations there. Torrio also traveled a lot during this period, and that meant Capone was in charge of the day-to-day. He knew with all the gang violence in recent years that even though he moved his operation to Cicero, he was the target from the other gangs. You kill the head of the snake, you kill everyone. So his idea was to just go travel. Now, with the beer wars in full swing, Al set up office in the Hawthorne Hotel. Al put his brother Frank in charge of the political stuff, like payoffs or whatever, and he made Ralph his muscle. Go take care of anybody who needs to be offed or anything like that. And they started systematically taking over the government of Cicero by intimidation at every vote. You need a new sheriff? Stand there. They stand in front of the fucking voting booths and say, you better vote the way we want to vote. We need a new mayor? Fuck yeah, we're going to rig that one too. They called it, you better vote right. And they would stand there with fucking guns and threaten people.
Nice. That's illegal as shit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The good old days.
The good old days. There was a young reporter named Robert St. John, and he started a newspaper to try and fight Al because Al already had a lot of stuff taken over by then. The Cicero Tribune. Al didn't like to be criticized, so anytime the Tribune printed anything against Capone or Torrio, St. John said that either he or his staff could be punished. This is what I meant, like they would break the fucking hands of the reporters. So to combat St. John, Al bribes the other newspapers in town, the Cicero Star, and starts to do community work. So then Al gets the Star to only report good stories about Al. Like Al opens soup kitchen. Al gives money to poor. Al does nice things. This is a nice guy, Al. The Star was a bigger paper, bigger than the Tribune anyway. So it had a bigger audience, and this helped with the softening up of Capone to the city at large. So in 1924, Capone got his guy in as mayor of Cicero, Joseph Z. Klenha, I don't know how you guys say it, Joseph Z. Klenha. He was already mayor, but he found Capone and asked him to help secure his reelection. Klenha promised his gangster buddies that he would look the other way, exactly what he wanted. So Capone brought in 200 Southside gang members to help with the election. They ransacked politician homes that weren't voting his way, threatened women who had been excited to use their vote for one of the first times, and anyone else, I guess, that got in their way. They even shot up campaign headquarters for the guy that was running against Klenha. So much violence that Chicago got wind of it, and they had to send in 70 members of law enforcement to help the situation out. More violence ensued, and at some point, there was an altercation with Al Capone, Frank Capone, and a few of their lackeys and the police. They were walking down the street when Frank saw two dark sedans following them. And when the sedan stopped, the altercation ensued. Now, this is reported in two different ways. One way is that the cops jumped out of their cars, guns drawn. The other is that when Frank saw the car stop, he pulled the gun on them. Either way, it doesn't matter. He's riddled with bullets by the time the cops are done with him. And apparently, Al escaped. Their lackeys were just injured. And like I said, Frank was killed. Capone held a $20,000 funeral in Frank's honor in the next couple days.
Wait, that cost more than his house.
Oh, fuck yeah. 3 times more.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Mayor Klenha used the violent election that he won because of the violence to use as a talking point to stop violence in Cicero. So he was like, I got to stop all the violence. I promise you guys, now that I'm mayor, I'm going to stop all the violence. He did it. He made this violence. Al, his brother, just got killed. Al didn't like this at all. So Al goes to City Hall and beats the shit out of the mayor of Cicero in front of City Hall. That's how corrupt Cicero was. He pulled the guy out of his office into the front of City Hall and beat the fuck out of him right there. No one stopped him.
The way that I would want to do that, like, or just like see that happen in modern day America, like that's so sick.
It's fucked. It's like a little town mayor just gets trounced by fucking Al Capone.
Yeah, dude, that would be I don't care where it is in the world. Like if a mayor gets like dragged, like I mean, like unless it's in like fucking like, you know, the Philippines or something, you'd be like, yeah, of course. But like if it's like, you know, in like Nebraska, if a mayor got dragged out and got his shit kicked in.
It's funny, like for sure, it's fucked up. But like, imagine how corrupt you'd have to be the whole town that no one did anything. No one did anything. Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, no repercussions. And the Chicago outfit ran their business from Cicero, unaffected by local law enforcement for years to come.
I mean, like, what the fuck are you gonna do though? Like, cause like even if like you're the cops and you see your boss getting his ass absolutely handed to him outside of his office,
it's great.
I'm just gonna be like, damn.
Maybe everyone hated the guy too.
Yeah, he really should have approved that overtime.
And just it'd probably turn on like fucking we'd record it and live stream it to something at this point.
Without question. Yeah, that shit would be everywhere if it was now.
In Chicago, the beer wars are still waging. Torrio's still trying to negotiate treaties between the gangs, but it's not working. There's these 6 brothers, the Jenna brothers, who were a little crime outfit who came from Sicily running some spots around Chicago. They were allied with Torrio, and they started to encroach on some North Side gang territories. And the North Side leader's name was Dan O'Banion, and he tried to make a deal with Torrio. But after not getting a satisfactory answer from Torrio, O'Banion threatened to unleash hell on Torrio and the Chicago outfit. So Torrio arranged for O'Banion to be murdered in broad daylight in front of his own flower shop. He's like, I can't deal with these guys. It's his own fault, though. Torrio couldn't keep his hands on his own guys. Like those Jenna brothers, they just kept encroaching. If they just would have stayed in their spot, they'd be fine. But they're the aggressors, is what I'm trying to say. Like, just a side note, Al bought those $20,000 worth of flowers from this O'Banion's flower shop, the guy that they just are about to murder. It was not long after. So the Northsiders were now led by a guy named Jaime Weiss, backed by a guy named Vincent Drucci and Bugs Moran.
Would you say his name was Miami Vice?
Jaime Weiss.
Oh.
With their leader being murdered, the Northsiders vowed revenge on the Chicago outfit. In 1925, there's an assassination attempt on Capone from the Northsiders as retribution for the O'Banion murder. He was shot at in the streets with a Thompson machine gun, a Tommy gun.
Woo.
The first time a Tommy gun was ever used in gang warfare. They were new from World War I, and they were finally making their way to the streets. And this actually made the streets way more deadly than they were before. Al gets away, but just barely. And Torrio sees this assassination attempt and thinks to himself, thank God, Al. I bet you had that too. But his main thought was like, oh, Al Capone's they think he's in charge now, so he's the target. I can come back home. I'm coming back home. I'm moving back to Chicago. So 12 days later, after Torrio moves back home, an assassination attempt on him by a lieutenant from the Northsiders, Bugs Moran, who shot and injured Torrio. Apparently, the story goes that Moran had a gun up to his head, tried to shoot, and either the gun jammed or he ran out of bullets. So that's the only reason he didn't kill him. When the cops got a hold of this, because it was a big shooting, everyone was like half dead. So Torrio's like lackeys are dead. Torrio ends up in the hospital and arrested. And I guess Al Capone gets called to be in front of the judge to ask what happened with the shooting. And Capone did what any good gangster does, doesn't talk. He never talked to the cops. No matter how much you hate the other guys, the cops are worse, He kept calling himself Al Brown, an antique furniture salesman. He's like, I'm Al Brown. I don't know what you're talking about. I sell antique furniture, guys. He did that often. He lied about so many things during that thing. The only thing that he said that was true to the judge was when the judge asked him, would you tell us anything if you did know anything? He said, no, I value my life too much to tell you if I did know anything. So he just told the judge, like, you're not scary. The streets are scary. And then Torrio spent about a month in the hospital in recovery. And Capone stuck by Torrio every day, spent every night at the hospital. And he posted lots of guards near him the entire time. After Torrio recovered, he was arrested and brought in front of the judge. Torrio had warrants from before being shot, bootlegging stuff, prohibition stuff. So he was sentenced to 9 months in jail. And Torrio did not care. He actually thought jail was a safer place for him to be right now, considering he just got shot at in the streets. Jail was different for gangsters back then. Well, I guess some gangsters are like this now. El Chapo and all these guys, you hear about their luxury living in jail. But yeah, he got his wife to come in and like decorate his cell, whatever he wanted. Got some nice rugs, some nice whatever. Every night, almost every night, they said Torrio would go to the warden's house for dinner and drink. Like, you go have supper with the warden. And then 9 months went by quickly. And Capone watched this, and Capone learned. He said, oh, okay, this is what I do if I go to jail. Now I know. He would do this later on in life. The assassination attempt forces Torrio into retirement, though. Once he gets out of jail, he's like, I'm done. The reins are yours, Al Capone. I'm going to go live out the rest of my life back in Italy. And he gives the Chicago outfit reins to a 26-year-old Al Capone. Torrio and Capone had run the outfit much differently. Torrio was in the shadows, in the literal underworld. Chicago is built 10 feet above swamp. I didn't know this. So there's literally like I say city, but it's not really a city. It's like tunnels and stuff. Trains go through there, stuff like that. But it was really good for the criminal element to run stuff around, especially during bootlegging time. There's fucking tunnels underneath the entire city. Streetcars and shit like that would go under there. So I guess they're built in the late 1800s, early 1900s to reduce the city's problems with flooding. And they're later used for running telephone lines and for a massive streetcar system. Torrio knew these tunnels would use them to go place to place downtown in Chicago. Now, Capone ran the outfit out in the open. Did not give a fuck. He used to say that he provided a service that people wanted. That was his job. He's just people wanted. I'm providing it. That's all what I'm doing. And he loved the show of the whole thing. Like he was always looking for press, which this is another thing that him and Eliot Ness were very similar on. Eliot Ness would call for the press to come anytime he had a bust so he could have a frontline headline. Eliot was much the same way. You would want to talk to the press. It was common for him to talk to the media. He was like a movie star level famous by the time he went to jail. Like he was worldwide famous. Yeah, he was always going to fancy restaurants with his fancy clothes. He was good to the community at large. Honestly, he donated shit tons of money to shit tons of places, especially the school that his little brother and sisters went to. Like I said, he was adamant they stay in school and get an education, so he made their life there a lot easier. Had he not been there, the school would have been a lot rougher, I'm sure. He looked at himself like a modern day Robin Hood, which is what lots of people looked at him like too, honestly.
That's like what all criminals do, though. Like when they have like, you know, that status and like empire. I mean, that's what they hide behind fucking the poor and defenseless and all that. Like it's a tactic.
For sure. But he like genuinely thought to a point that he was doing a public service, which
Yeah, it's what justifies murdering somebody because they pointed out the incredibly obvious scars on your face.
yeah, that's true. It's true. People did kind of love him, you know. The government were the bad guys. They were taking away their alcohol. He was the guy actually helping them out. And he was helping out with like soup kitchen, shit like that. He was in the community. The people didn't like the violence, but they turned the other way. They turned the other cheek to it. You know what I mean? People hated prohibition more than they hated violence. You know what I mean? Like all this while, Al's collecting allies in the police department, in the media, in the government. You know, his power is greatly rising in Chicago. Here's a fun Capone story that happens around this time, and I didn't know where to fit it, so I'm fitting it here. Capone used to love gambling.
Did Canada have a version of prohibition ever?
No, we supplied you guys with alcohol, a lot of it.
Oh, that's fucking wild.
We came shipped
And
it over.
what's the downside again? You guys can't have guns?
We can have guns, it's just very regulated.
They did have the Bacon Wars, and as we know today, the flat salami circles won, and it was the greatest tragedy in the history of the world.
Can you get like American bacon up there easily?
Yeah, we just call that bacon, and the other one we call pea meal bacon. It's not Canadian bacon up here. It's called
we call it Canadian bacon.
That is fucking way worse name than Canadian bacon.
Yeah, why wouldn't you guys just take credit for like the second place bacon?
I don't know.
Pea meal?
Yeah.
What was the name? Poop dinner taken?
Shit
Ew.
breakfast.
Yeah.
Shit breakfast bacon. PEAMEA, like P. Like
I mean, I'm sure, but that doesn't take away what it sounds like.
Okay, I don't know. I know it's called Canadian bacon where you guys are, but to me it's pea meal bacon.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I know it's not your fault, but fuck.
I never thought of it in that way before because I see, like, when I buy pea meal bacon, you see it. I don't see PEE space bacon or meal bacon. You know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah.
So
yeah,
wait,
sorry.
which do you buy? Like more regularly?
Just
like what's your
normal bacon.
preferred?
Just bacon.
Okay.
Pea meal bacon is just ham. Like it's just fried ham. It's okay. It's not that good though. It's like salty ass ham.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, the name of it ruins it because it's like you can get ham and eggs here. It's not that, but like you get Canadian bacon and eggs, and it's just like it's like someone cracked open a package of Oscar Mayer and then like microwaved it and was like, "Here you go." And it's like, why would I have this when I could have regular ham? Like,
Yeah, no, for sure.
no.
So yeah, here's a fun story about Capone. He used to love gambling, which was dangerous because he also had a bad temper and he sucked at golf. And they all had guns too. Typically, Al didn't carry a gun in public, but in private he carried a gun. So one time he's golfing, and I guess he's digging through his pocket or something, and he shot his scrotum while drunkenly golfing with some friends. He had to spend 2 weeks in jail for that.
Nice.
He just shot his scrotum. I don't know where to fit that in there, but he definitely did it.
Can fit it in the notch in his scrotum.
So yeah, now machine guns are in the streets, like I said. The mid-20s until its eventual capture of Capone were some of the most bloody. The other gangs were starting to hate Capone even more because now he's vocal in the media. They wanted no attention to their business. If he gets attention, they get attention. If he just would shut the fuck up, they could go apart their business with less cops knocking down their doors. So now Capone keeps exposing them. He's exposing them all. Assassination attempts grew tenfold during this time. There's one story where a rival gang just like shot Tommy guns around his house. Al was surprised. He like, oh, no bullets came through my, what the fuck is that? And he went and looked at the window, and that was like the whole point. They were just trying to get him to look at the window. They shot the window as soon as he popped his head. Good thing his bodyguard, who stayed with him for most of the rest of his life, named Frankie Rio, was there and saw it coming and jumped and shot him to the ground.
He shot Al Capone to the ground to protect him?
No, like he chucked him, like he grabbed him and threw him to the ground.
Mr. Capone, no, get down!
Just shoots his knees out.
He's like, oh, thank you, Frankie. You shot me before they could shoot me.
Yeah, Capone's under a lot of stress right now. First, he moves out of the Hawthorne Inn. He knew everybody could watch him come and go, and that made him nervous. So he wanted another place that was more secluded, that only his closest confidants would know where he was at all times. So he moves into an apartment building he buys back in Chicago. This building had a tunnel that led to the garage so that he could avoid any drive-by shooting. So he would just park in the garage and walk into his house through the tunnel. Then he moves from there because he didn't like that place that much. He sets up a place called the Lexington Hotel. He buys the whole place, and it ended up being like his like complex, his whole place of operations. And the Lexington, he made bulletproof everything, like bulletproof windows, bulletproof fucking walls, bulletproof like everything. The back of his chair was bulletproof. When he turned around, he was bulletproof in the back. Like, I don't know. He had a personal chef that he would take a bite of every bit of his meals before he would eat anything. He's going down the paranoid, and I don't blame him. He's being an idiot. And Capone basically lived in Lexington until his eventual arrest in 1933. He does have other houses that he does frequent, but this is his main base of operations.
That was the one, dude. That was a Snork fortress.
Missed opportunity. You should have called it Snork Fortress. I like that.
I think he did in private. I think we all know he did. Just to save face, they were like, no, Al, that means you're gay. Never mind. It's the Lexington, everybody.
The Snorky. I love being Snorky.
Yeah.
All right. So Capone had a bunch of assassinations. He's fighting this war. He was at war with another gangster headed by the O'Donnells. So one night, Tom Duffy, Jim Doherty, and William McSwiggan went to a place called the Pony Inn for a few drinks. And as they're leaving, Capone's men drive by and riddle Jim Doherty and his friends with bullets, killing all three. Doherty was known to be affiliated with the O'Donnell gang, so that was normal. That's the fighting that was happening. But his other friend, William McSwiggan, he's the assistant state attorney, and he was out to get Capone's gang. So he was out talking to that guy to try and get some sway to get Capone off the street. He was an unfortunate death, not targeted, more of an innocent bystander. Not how the city saw it, though. Mayor Deirdre was pissed. Now he's out to get Capone even more. And now he was on the map of everyone, any type of power. So now it's not just the gangsters, it's the actual people that were supposed to stop him are trying to stop him now. Capone didn't have to worry about that long. Almost a year later, on April 18th, 1927, elections for mayor were being held again. Capone made sure to get Deirdre out and his buddy Big Jim back in. I can't remember his last name now. So he for sure went and sent guys to the polling stations to make them vote for the way they wanted them to vote for, just like he done in Cicero a few years back. Big Jim's reelected by a small margin, and Chicago became less of a risk for Capone again. By the end of 1927, I believe this is what they called I could be wrong. I don't think I wrote it in here, but maybe it's later. But they call this one the pineapple election or whatever, pineapple primaries, because they would chuck bombs. Like Capone had made bombs, and all the people would call them, they look like the shape of pineapples. So he's bombing places. Like, that's how psycho this guy is.
So he's Robin Hood, but also a terrorist.
Oh, for sure.
Robin Hood if he did terrorism.
Robin Hood, well, put it this way. What would the police call Robin Hood? What would the sheriff of Nottingham call Robin Hood? A terrorist.
Yeah, but I would need some evidence that Robin Hood is callously trying to affect the rich with disregard for the lives of innocents. Like,
What would the sheriff of Nottingham say if he saw him hanging out with a black man? He's a terrorist.
I feel like he'd be like, "What is that thing?" Because it's the Middle Ages,
Jesus.
right? Like,
I'm just saying, Morgan Freeman was the best part of that movie.
oh, I haven't seen Robin Hood in fucking years. I wasn't talking about the movie. I thought it was like,
I
what the
was
fuck
just
was
talking-
it before it was the movies? Was it like it's not like a fairy tale, is it?
I guess it's like an old story or something. I don't know, honestly.
Yeah, I have no idea where its origins even are. So
I don't know, honestly. I have no clue. Good
Maybe-
question.
yeah, maybe we need to investigate
it's
that.
because of the Fox movie from Disney from the 1920s.
Yeah, it's-
So by the end of 1927, so many people had died in the streets from gang wars. It was getting harder and harder to fight Capone. Literally just not enough guys. So Capone capitalizes this and calls a meeting. Capone calls all the leaders of all the gangs to a meeting where he proposes a truce, the same truce that Torrio was offering. Split the city up into territories, and there's more than enough money for everyone. And Al, I don't know, plus he's just sick of looking over his shoulder, and he didn't want to fight anymore. He wanted to spend more time with Mae and Sonny. So the gang leaders agreed to the truce, and Al went home to the suburbs for the first time in months. Now, just to let you know, this truce lasted 2 months max, and then they were back fighting, but there was a truce. Soon as he gets back home, Mae was happy to have him back at home because Al's mother and Mafalda had been driving her fucking crazy. She just wanted to get out of Chicago for a bit and just hang out with Al and Sonny. So Al agrees, and he says, let's go on a vacation. So they end up deciding to go to the West Coast, to LA. In December 1927, Al, his wife, Sonny, Ralph, and some of his goons get on a train and head to the City of Angels. Side note, Ralphie was living with Sonny and Mae, and he wasn't invited. Ralph, like his dad, was allowed to go. So Ralphie had to stay with the bitchy, which I'm assuming is bitchy, Grandma Teresa and Mafalda. He was so mad. Bottles got to go, though. Before he gets on the train, Al addresses the crowd that had gathered. By the way he was talking, like he was making a speech to them, it sounded like he was never coming back to Chicago. It sounded like he was retiring out to LA. I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. That was kind of exciting for the news. Is Scarface Al retiring? And then all you hear is a bone break. Not yet. The moment the train arrives in LA, though, the mayor and the sheriff and a crowd of people are waiting for Capone at the station. And they tell Capone that you cannot stay in this city. You're not allowed. You can stay for one night, get your affairs together, maybe two, get back on the train and head back to Chicago. So Al's kicked out of LA with his brother and his family. They were gone for 8 days total, and 6 of those were traveling there and back. Like I said, Al's a huge celebrity by this time. So after he gets kicked out of LA, the general public hears about it, and he kind of becomes like a joke after that, like a little bit of a, like people laugh behind his back. He can't even go to LA. What a loser, you know? Not to his face, because he'd break your face, but like in whispers, he's starting to lose the crowd a little bit, is what I'm saying. Mae still wanted to go on holiday, though. She was pissed. Like, I'm not even allowed to go anywhere. So Al does a little bit of research. He says we can go still, but I got to do a little research. And he calls the mayor of a few major cities and finds one that he's allowed in, which is the mayor of Miami. In March 1928, they head to Miami, where he's allowed in by the mayor as long as he doesn't get into any quote-unquote tough stuff. Everyone else in the country is like, why are you letting him in here? Don't let him in. He's like, well, he's brings lots of money. They're actually excited to get his money, really. That's what they said. He bribed him. And then Capone, they loved it there. Mae was so happy to be out of there. Capone ends up buying a house in Miami under Mae's name, house for Mae and Sonny. Mae didn't like Chicago. And after this visit, she never really went back. She went back a few times, but she just stayed in Miami. His mother, Teresa, Ralphie, his sister, and many other people took over their house in Chicago. While they're on vacation, the Illinois primary is happening in April. So yes, okay. So this is when that pineapple primary is happening. From his house in Miami, he orchestrated what is now called the pineapple primary. Pineapples in this case are what they called the bombs that were set off at polling stations to prevent people from voting against Capone-backed candidates. Mayor Big Bill Thompson didn't really help calm the Capones down. One of the candidates for Senate was run down in his car, shot and killed that night. His name was Diamond Joe Esposito. I only said his name because it was fun.
Diamond Joe Espy. Sounds like a guitarist.
Sounds like a baseball player to me. Sounds like he's an outfielder.
That too.
Sounds like a Justin Bieber song.
Diamond Joe Esposito.
Esposito.
Oh, okay. I was going to
Oh.
sing me some of it, but you did. There's so much violence that day that it's the beginning of the turnings of the community man, Al Capone, into the gangster, dangerous man that he actually was. Violence was back in the streets too, because, you know, gangsters couldn't keep the truce. Capone was getting more and more paranoid for his safety. In 1928, he made a bulletproof, he didn't make it. He bought a bulletproof Cadillac worth $20,000 in 1920 money. The steel plating added 3,000 pounds of weight. The back window came out so a machine gun could be shot through it. He's just sick of all the gang wars. So he wanted to live a normalish life without always having to look over his shoulder. Too bad, buddy. You make lots of money stepping on people's throats. People are going to want to step on your throats. You're too late now. You know,
It's like a classic story. Like,
yeah. So this is what I mean. The story's so like American. It's so
yeah.
problem is now the genie's out of the bottle. As much as he wanted to stop the war, the other gang leaders weren't listening to reason. That and Capone's men just kept encroaching on their enemy's territory without regard to consequences. So without resolution, Capone wanted to make one big play and end all the gang wars. Plus, Capone just wanted a little revenge in there too. So here's his opportunity. He made it very public that there was an alcohol shipment coming in on Valentine's Day. Okay, February 14th, 1929. So there's going to be the craziest alcohol shipments coming in. So he makes it public. Everyone knows about it. They're all talking about it. So the Northside gang decides they're going to send 7 people to go intercept the supposed Capone liquor and steal it for themselves. The boss of the Northside gang at this point is Bugs Moran. Bugs inherited the gang when Jaime Weiss was taken out a couple of years earlier. So Bugs was supposed to be at the warehouse to get the alcohol with the 7 men. But the story goes running late because he was out getting a haircut at the barbershop because it was Valentine's Day and he had a date in the evening. The 7 Moran guys show up to get the booze. They're looking around for it. 4 other men show up. 2 of them are dressed as police officers and 2 others claim to be plainclothes detectives. They told the 7 men to line up facing the wall and the officers could search them. This is the middle of the day, by the way. This is like 12 o'clock in the afternoon. These guys probably thought, no big deal. Police in Chicago were easily bribed. Who gives a shit? So as soon as they're all lined up, a few other guys with Tommy guns came out and mowed them down right then and there in the middle of town, broad daylight. This is what they call now the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It was actually photographed and made national headlines the next day. The gruesome shots, you can still look on the internet if you want to find them. They're not that gruesome compared to what today is, but back then that was like, whoa. It's still pretty bad. Like, it's a bunch of dead dudes, but it's not. I've seen fucking far worse. Herbert Hoover, since it made national headlines, Herbert Hoover, he was the new president of the United States, and he got wind of this, and he was begged by officials in Chicago to take down the now infamous Kingpin. Hoover ordered the Capone squad that Eliot Ness was in charge of, the squad that was eventually named by the press as the Untouchables. Now, if you want to hear more about the Untouchables and Eliot Ness, go back an episode and you will hear about it. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre is really big because it changed public opinion of Capone. Really is the big thing that it did. Between the murder of McSwiggan, Diamond Joe during the pineapple primaries, and the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the public had enough with Capone shit. People just didn't want to live in fear of getting shot in the middle of the day. That was the big thing. Like, now it was all happening at night in corners. This is in the middle of a fucking day now. Capone was honestly never proven to be the person who ordered the hit on Bugs, like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but like, it's pretty fucking obvious it was him. Of course, Bugs and the rest of the gang were out to get Capone after this, but he didn't fear the Southside gang. He'd been warring with them for a long time now. Bugs Moran put a $50,000 bounty on whoever could kill Capone. $50,000 in 1926 money is a shit ton of money. So 3 of Capone's men decided to take up Moran on the offer. These 3 men didn't have any beef with Capone at all. It was just their greed that got the better of them. I guess these guys were talking about it at the bar, and Frankie Rio heard about it. And Frankie Rio went straight to Capone and told him about it. And Capone didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. So he decided he was going to test these 3 men. So he and Rio set up an elaborate plan. Rio and Capone would pretend to get in a fight. They're at the restaurant, and Rio gets up and slaps Capone across the face and storms out of the restaurant while those 3 guys are there. So the three men thought it was awesome that Rio would go up to fucking Capone and slap him in the face, and they figured this was an opportunity. If we can get Frankie Rio, his number one bodyguard, on our side to kill Capone, then we can do this, no problem. They approach Rio and they say, hey, let's do this. And Rio's like, sure. Obviously, Rio goes right to Capone and says, okay, it's real. It's not. They came up to me and said. So Capone's idea is he's going to set up a dinner in honor of these three guys. Big, nice, long dinner. After a nice evening of what I'm assuming is spaghetti and laughter.
Yes, the exact thing the Italians subsist off of exclusively.
Capone switches to furious, like on a dime. It was near the end of the night, and he starts, you little piece of shit. And then three men come up from behind where these other guys are sitting and push them back into their seat when they're trying to stand. Then Capone gets out a baseball bat and beats these men to death while they're seated in their chairs in front of everyone.
Damn.
Then Capone's men take the three men, put them back in their car, drive them out into the middle of nowhere. They light the car on fire, and then before they leave, they riddle the burning casket on wheels with Tommy gun fire just to make sure people get the point. You want to try and fucking kill me? Even if you're my own guys, I will fucking desecrate your corpse.
Okay, but like they had Tommy guns and they beat them to death with baseball bats.
No,
I don't like
Capone specifically himself killed these three guys. To
yeah,
prove a point.
that gets the point across. They like
yeah,
like
for sure.
everything like nothing else is like even remotely hits that height. Like I get it. I get the overkill to be like, whoa, but it's like, excuse me, you did what? Like
I guess that it never went through, obviously, because he never got assassinated. But yeah, I think that was the biggest attempt and the most publicized. Now, I don't know how like exaggerated these stories are to make him more legend than he is. I don't know if he's the one who actually beat the shit out of them. It's reported in that way by the biographer. The biographer even says like it could have just been like the bodyguards doing all of this. But it's more fun to say Al Capone did it, so I'm going to perpetuate that. Like, it's more fun.
I have this image because, like, I don't believe he was 6'3" tall. I believe he was probably like 4'9", like just like waddled around, like with a really high pitched voice, calling himself Snorky all the time. So, like, if he like beat someone to death with like a baseball bat, it was really probably just a super intimidating bodyguard standing there with his arms crossed, and he was just like struggling to lift a baseball bat, going like, eh.
He's got Frankie Rio behind him, like ghosting the baseball bat.
like show like a dad, showing him t-ball. You mess with me.
Gotta say it with a deeper voice. Yeah, mess with me.
You mess with me. Al Capone.
I'm Snorky. I'm Snorky. Now that the St. Valentine, all this stuff, the mayor can't protect him anymore, and the police are back after him. Local governments are keeping him out of cities because of it. You know, cities across America. Federal government was actively trying to stop him in Chicago. This scared Al. Al was rightfully terrified now. The federal government, state governments, other gangsters, city government, everyone's after him.
He was shaking in his Snorky boots.
Yeah, and federal agents don't bribe as much as the locals do. So
yeah, they get paid really well.
Here's a fun thing that happens that I didn't know existed, but in May 1929, Al's invited to the Atlantic City Conference, which was widely considered the first ever gangster conference. So gangsters from all over the U.S. attended with the intentions of figuring out how to maximize profits. Ideas included pooling their money, planning business strategy for the end of Prohibition, and who is to answer for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone was to be the sacrificial lamb. He didn't admit to doing it, but he was the guy who was the most public, and they said, you know what? You're taking the fall for this, asshole. Al's even more scared after this conference. He went there trying to be tough. All these other gangsters brought like 5 or 6 guys. All Al brought with him was just Frankie Rio. He just went there, him and Frankie Rio, and he made it out alive, but he was scared. So instead of going back to Chicago, Al come up with a plan. It's the old Johnny Torrio plan. He decides he's going to go to Philadelphia because he knew the warden of a jail there, and he's going to get jail. He's going to call the police on himself for carrying a gun. So he and his friend, longtime bodyguard, Frankie Rio, call the police, wait for them to show up, and get arrested. And Al never carried a gun. Rio did, but Al really didn't. And they both plead guilty to this and get a 1-year sentence. It was a lavish time in jail for Capone, too. He got anything he wanted. Got Mae come in, bring him fine furniture, beautiful rugs, paintings. Got a $5,000 radio. It's almost worth as much as his house. Yeah, anyone he wanted to see, he ran his business out of there. It was safest place he could be, in jail. He's now just protected by guards. So he stayed in there for a year. From the time McSwiggan was killed until his eventual arrest, the Untouchables are knocking down his door. But they're really not knocking down his door. I just figured this out when I did research on Capone. Capone wasn't really in Chicago. He's like in Miami. He's all over the place, but in Chicago. So the whole time Eliot Ness is trying to catch Capone, Capone's just not there. He's just knocking down breweries' doors. Capone wasn't going to be there. Like, you were very rare to have Capone in Chicago. Capone was in fucking jail for a year of it. You know what I mean? So I just thought that was interesting.
That is ironic because it's more like Capone was the real Eliot Ness.
It's true.
Almost like he didn't exist. So you had Nessie looking for him, but couldn't find him.
I thought that was pretty fun. Do you think Ness knew that he wasn't around? But you just think
I don't know. I don't pretend to know how cryptids think.
I just think it's an interesting question. Like, was he running there trying to fucking catch Capone, or was he just trying to shut down breweries and using the media as like an outlet to like say, I'm coming to get you, Capone, but he knew he wasn't around? I hope he didn't know. I hope he didn't know.
Joking aside, like everything we learned about, like him is that he was a fucking fame whore, idiot, loser. I didn't like anything I heard about him when we did him. So I'm certain he was probably dumb enough to be like, I'm gonna be the guy. I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, no, probably. You're probably right. That's the thing that's fucked up. Like, he just didn't even know. My God. He's fucking going in front of the news being like, I'm never coming back. I'm going to LA for the rest of my life. And Ness is kicking in the door. I'm coming to get you, Capone. Like,
He's lying.
Yeah.
I know it.
Go back to the Ness episode. You want to hear more about that. But yeah, I know Ness wasn't making his life easy. It's just, he just wasn't around getting arrested. He cost him millions of today's dollar money. Like, anyways, the Untouchables are on the ground getting prohibition charges laid on Capone. The government's already trying to get Capone on tax evasion charges. We talked about that in another episode. Because Capone wasn't around, his business was falling apart even before Ness. The Great Depression was already starting to take hold and profits were down on all illegal activities. If you can't afford food, you're not spending on whores, is really what's the moral of that
I
story.
don't fucking believe that for a second. That if you can't afford food, you're not spending on whores.
Not as much. I'm sure you're still banging whores, but not like.
Yeah.
It's just what it is.
Rick's like, there's always room for whores. I spend 22
Inflation
hours
be
a
damned.
day writing programs to automate my car starting.
He's fully recharged, guys.
Still find time for hookers.
This hooker is fully recharged. I thought you were going with like he's got one on his hooker.
No,
She's
he's
now ready to
got
go.
the program called so that it goes on backpage.com for him right when he gets home from work, and it knows the right filters to search through. And
You got a website top of mind, ready to fucking go.
you never heard of Backpage, pal?
I am not. I'm gonna look it up. I don't know if I should look it up on this computer.
Mr. Champion of sex workers over here.
No, I did not know that was a thing.
Maybe it's too mainstream for you. You're on the indie whore sites.
Yeah.
Okay. The press is starting to turn on Capone too because they're starting to follow Ness a lot more. So Capone starts to combat that by opening soup kitchens. And he was feeding 3,000 people a day during the Great Depression, which is something, but it's not really making up for his assholism. It didn't really work either. Like, press saw right through him. In 1930, the government put Al's brother, Ralph, in jail for tax evasion. A couple years before they got Al. I didn't know that. Old Bottles wasn't the first bootlegger to be put in jail for tax evasion. In 1927, a bootlegger named Manly Sullivan was put in jail for the exact same thing. Manly brought the case to the Supreme Court stating that the money he made was not legal, therefore it shouldn't be subject to tax laws. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the government. And after that, ill-gotten gains were considered taxable. So I find that pretty cool. If you're running around making $0 in a fucking Mercedes, you owe us taxes. Ralph was an easy target for tax evasion charges because Ralph put all the stuff he owned under his own name while not completing his tax returns. Al was a different beast. Everything he owned was under a fake name, his wife's name, or even the name of some of his employees. So they had to follow him around and figure out what he owned, how he spent his money, and to keep track of it all. And it seems like a big task before the internet, before electronic surveillance, but they did it. And President Hoover really wanted Capone in jail, so they did. They followed him around for years, figuring out a ballpark amount that Al was worth, and it was lots. Al would spend $1,000 a week in food alone. That's more than most people would spend in a year in food every week. His expensive suits, custom cars, and even custom-made silk underwear was brought under scrutiny, and that's one of the things they talked about a lot in his case was if you can afford silk underwear, where are you getting the money?
Well, that's not fair. The man had a misaligned scrotum. He needed it to be custom made so it could fit his misshapen sack, and it had to be silk so that it was soft enough to not irritate the very sensitive scar tissue.
That's true. Scar balls.
Yeah, he was scar sack, and that one didn't even get around. That's how serious he was about stomping that shit out.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone called him scar sack and got fucking just clipped.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Estimates at the end of all this is Capone was making $100 million a year. He would have been a billionaire by today's standards, and he never paid any income tax. He claimed that he made no money.
How would you? I mean, can you? So, like, can I commit crimes, make money, and then pay my taxes, and I'm fine? I'm not. They can't get me on the tax evasion shit, but now they're going to be looking at me because I got all this money.
They could get you on your illegal activity. Where'd you get the money?
But they wouldn't know. But do I have to say, oh, it was illegal activity? It was just activity.
You'll see Al's response to this. He tries to pay taxes. He says, okay, fine, I'll pay you some taxes. And they don't accept it.
Right.
That feels like a violation of Fifth Amendment rights or something. Because
I'm pretty
sure it is, because you would basically be going up and it's the same reason that the original Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was outlawed. Because you would go in and basically have to say, I committed a crime. Here's the money to back up the taxes for it. So I don't think they can legally. That's like a catch-22 situation. And the United States are not allowed to do that, according to our Constitution.
I'm going to tell you right now, it's 1921 or 1930, 31. And
I mean, we had the Fifth Amendment back then. So.
I know, but they don't give a fuck.
I mean, that part's probably true.
That's what I'm saying.
If you were on trial today for that, that shit wouldn't fly.
No, they probably get him on his other crimes. They'd probably drop the tax evasion and get him on his other crimes. But
yeah, because I mean, my assumption is that he was obviously operating under some loophole because they couldn't prove precisely what it was that he was doing, so they used what they could against him. But I mean, I also feel like they would have to prove he was doing the thing, because if it's tax evasion, it's not so much. I feel like tax evasion is not the crime of not paying your taxes. It's conducting business in a way that purposefully avoids paying taxes. That's my understanding of it. I don't know if that's accurate, but
yes, and
it's not like something you can apologize for.
I don't know. But income tax was so young back then. It's so weird that I don't know.
Income tax that was being defined a lot more during this time. I bet you there's been a lot of amendments to how this works between then and now.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, because theoretically, everything that fucking the ultra wealthy do is tax evasion, because they are literally evading taxes. They're just doing it under a legal sense.
But also, I mean, I'm pretty sure, based on the original interpretation of the Constitution, everyone looks at federal income tax as technically illegal, but it's just I mean, there's no way to get rid of it at this point.
Yeah, no, you'll see he's a billionaire and he's not paying tax. He's claiming he makes nothing. That's the thing, is he's not even filing any taxes at all. He could have fudged the numbers, gotten a lawyer, and said oh, I have these 3 brothels, they make so much, and this is how he just has to be able to justify. He just didn't know people were following him, watching him buy $1,000 worth of pork chops. How do you figure that out? If you're doing that every day, then you have to be making so much. He could have figured it out if he just was smart enough to do it. That's all. He just didn't know he had to. It's not that he didn't know he had to pay taxes. He just didn't know that the cops were following him and fucking with him, right? Because he's all illegal. He figured, I don't know, like that other guy. It's all illegal. I don't have to pay taxes on that. And now you do, dude. It's only 3 years old, that ruling, right? When he gets fucked. or ill-gotten gains are taxable. That only started in 1927. So he gets he gets put in jail in 1933. So it's only 5 or 6 years old, the law of that being like hammered down by the fucking Supreme Court.
Well, I think, and that's where it comes from. Really, that was the other point I was going to make, is that if it's the Supreme Court, they're literally the people who decide how to interpret the amendments. Like, if they decide it,
it was still up in the air until that point. According to the law, illegal earnings had to be claimed. He paid his property taxes, stuff like that, just never paid income tax. So with all the circumstantial evidence they had against Al, the federal government eventually decides to bring Capone in for tax evasion. Al hires a tax lawyer who actually fucks him over. I think it was just a bad lawyer. They figured out a modest amount to tell the prosecutors he made and told Al to offer to pay all his back taxes on that sum. It was $100,000 a year. They should have never admitted to anything to the prosecutors, because after they saw him with all his expensive clothes and lavish parties, $100,000 a year wouldn't be able to afford anything like that. So now that he's lying to the cops, they get him even worse. The state thought that if they went to trial, they weren't going to be able to convict with the amount of evidence they had, but the evidence is circumstantial, damning but circumstantial. So Al offers them a deal. Al gives them a deal. He pleads guilty with the understanding that he would only get 2.5 years in jail and pay $10,000 in taxes, in back taxes. They're scared they're not going to actually prosecute him because this is all fresh laws. What do they know? It's all circumstantial. So they say, well, cool, we'll get him to admit guilt. At least they'll recover some of the back taxes and get Al off the street for a couple of years. So they bring the deal to the judge, Judge James Wilkerson, who fucking hated Al Capone, by the way, and he threw out the deal. He said, I'm not accepting this deal. We're going to court. And Capone said, fine. He rescinds his guilty plea and decides to try his luck in court. So Al decides, that's not that big of a deal. I'm just going to get off by bribing or intimidating the jury. I'll just, either one, bribe them, intimidate them. I can do that. No problem. So even if he does get time, it would be a minor, like offense, and he'd be like a hotel stay again. Ralph only got 18 months. How much could I really get? 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, maybe? You could do that, no problem. So on the first day of the trial, they bring in Capone. After Capone's brought into the courtroom, the judge orders the jury to leave. So the jury gets up and walks out, and a new jury is brought in. A new jury that Capone didn't know about and hadn't had a chance to bribe or intimidate yet. So they had another jury trial going on like 2 courts over. They just swapped juries.
Genius.
Capone's like fucking pissed about it. He's like panicking now. He's actually scared. Capone was eventually found guilty. And we talked about why in the last episode, because people would rather him be guilty for tax evasion because it's the fucking depression and they want the government to have the money to give them money back than the guy who provided them alcohol, their fund for the past. So they went for so they got him. Judge Wilkerson threw the book at Capone, giving him 11 years on something he thought he would get max 2.5, maybe 3 years. So Capone, he was kept in the Cook County jail. Capone knew he was going to serve his time in Leavenworth, Kansas, where he was friendly with the warden and he'd be able to live lavishly while running his operation. Cook County didn't let him do up a cell like he did in Philly, but they did give him some special treatment. He did get to make calls and run his operation, and he got whatever visitors he wanted, and he got to visit his son and wife at the warden's house.
Wait, I have a question.
Yep.
I have a question about this jury. So did they bring in like the people that were originally selected for a different case? Because don't both lawyers have the opportunity to essentially like judge the like impartialness
I agree
of the jurors?
I don't understand how
people out, or do they just throw out the fucking rules and they're like, fuck it, we think he bribed him, swap.
They swapped from just a jury down the road. So I don't think any of the court got any.
Man, they did not follow any sort of fucking due process here, huh?
But I don't know if jury selection was the same back then. I don't think
I don't know. I tried to figure it out. As far as I can tell, they've been doing it the same way since the 1760s. So
where they interview 50 people, like how do they get 50 and then they figure out like
no, it's just a process called word dire, whatever. But it basically refers to like, yeah, sure, but it refers to like chopping the jury down based on basically both sides having input. So it just seems like if they went through that whole thing, I mean, sure, you'd have to start over if he bribed them, but
then you can't really figure out a way to do it because they keep bribing them. And he's the judge. And the judge probably did this knowing it's not legal and going like, we'll deal with it in appeals.
Well, what was also really interesting, I don't know if you get to it, but I was looking into like what his lawyers' arguments were. I don't know if you actually talk about
Yeah,
that
for
at
sure.
all?
Well, not really, because I kind of skimmed past.
One of his arguments was the piece I was talking about, was that they straight up argued him paying taxes on illegal activity would have been against his Fifth Amendment right. And apparently the US basically said, now this is a new precedent. Like, you have no Fifth Amendment rights when it comes to paying taxes on crimes, which is fucking crazy. Because it's the whole point of the Fifth Amendment. But then the other one is that the government couldn't have collected the taxes, as they'd be illegally profiting off of a criminal enterprise, which is like a fucking genius defense. I mean, obviously it didn't work, but
Yeah, it
Well,
didn't work.
yeah,
but
I mean that's literally like the fucking whole point of the war on drugs now.
it's the exact same. Like, really,
And
literally
also,
the same.
like, that's like no crazier than like any other fucked up ruling that they've made over the past fucking 100 years following that. Like,
well, they use this as
they
the
literally
precedent.
just decided on a whim to fucking undo Roe v. Wade based on complete and utter fabricated bullshit. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
you know what I mean? Like, there's tons of things the government has done. Like, it's just not any more crazy or worse than the government deciding what the fuck they're gonna do. I mean, like, think of like every fucking presidency we've had. At some point in every fucking presidency, the president does something inherently unconstitutional,
Yeah, for sure.
and
What, you don't like
nothing
drones?
ever happens. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like,
You're a drone defender to the end. We know you make them. We know you program them.
I automated murdering brown children in poor countries. It's crazy. I just tell my watch to do it, and it does it.
I got a kill count right on my watch right here.
Yeah.
17 today.
I can tell the exact temperature of their bodies as their corpse is decomposing on an hour-to-hour basis.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. All right. So Capone sent to jail. Right away went to the Cook County Jail. Capone knew he was going to serve his time in Leavenworth, Kansas, where he had friendly with the warden, and he'd be able to live lavishly running his operation through that jail. Cook County didn't let him set up a cell like they did in Philly, but they gave him some special treatment. He did get to make calls. He run his operation. He got whatever visitors he wanted. He got to visit his son and wife at the warden's house. He got like better treatment than most. Then, when he's about time to be transferred, they transfer him to the Atlanta Penitentiary, not where he thought he was going. This is that little meeting where Capone and Ness have, where the trip from Cook County to the train station. It's the only time they ever actually met. You could go back to an episode, like I said. Al was pissed about going to Atlanta, though, because he didn't know anybody in Atlanta. He knew people in Leavenworth, and he's going to have to go to be a real jail. He doesn't have enough sway to get by over there. He was excited to go somewhere else because in Cook County, he was by himself in a cell all day. At least in jail, he'd be around other people. He was a very social person, as we've talked about. He loved the crowd, so he did like to have people around him. Now, he was transferred there. One of his men actually got arrested. It's not Frankie Rio, it's another guy, just so he could watch Al in jail. Like, he wanted to go with him. So he did go with one of his men. So when Capone gets to Atlanta, he's evaluated medically, and the prison doctors diagnose him with neurosyphilis. So his syphilis had actually gone up to his brain and started to rot his brain. In Atlanta, Capone didn't get any special treatment. He lived in a bunk with 6 other men. Capone tries to keep his head down so they could get early release. So apparently, if you were good for every 30 days you were good, you got 10 days off your sentence. So he knew math. He was good at like the bookkeeping at stuff. So he knew, like, if he would just, he'd spend a quarter of his time, he'd get off if he just kept his head down. So he ends up working in the shoe shop most of the time. He's there, learns a little skill. He keeps quiet. People wanted to fight him because he's Al Capone, but like, he had his like bodyguard there. Nothing really bad happens in Atlanta. He's there for 2 years. He would have stayed in Atlanta for his whole sentence, but Alcatraz is refabricated into a civilian jail in August 1934. Alcatraz was converted into a federal prison from an old military prison on an island off the coast of San Fran. Al was sent there just to send a message to other gangsters. The worst of the worst go there, and good luck running your operation from there. You live in a trash heap. It's a fucking 6x6 cell with no windows, surrounded by water, hard for people to come visit you. Or sorry, it's a 6x10 cell. Capone didn't have any recognition there either. He was just known as Prisoner 85. Nobody had names in Alcatraz, none of the prisoners. They just named them by their number. Capone's neurosyphilis was getting worse too. Other inmates didn't care that he was the great Alphonse Capone while he was there. He was actually was like fucking big time murderers, people with 25 to life living there. He got 11 years for tax evasion. He was just sent there on principle. So he was kind of like a little bitch there, and he was starting to lose his mind. A lot of people just wanted to make a name for themselves. So he's bullied in jail by the other inmates. He really was. He didn't want to make any waves. Al knew I got to keep my head down. So he didn't really do much. He just took the punishment from the other guys. It wasn't really all bad for Capone and Alcatraz. He got to play banjo in the prison band, and they would play
Cool.
every Sunday for the inmates.
That was his real dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the best Italian banjo player.
Kept calling it his he had a mandolin too, I believe, when he was in there. He did that until he got too sick from his neurosyphilis. The untreated syphilis from his younger years finally caught up with him, and it spread to his brain.
Gotta play the fucking banjo. He's like doing it upside down and trying to like blow into it.
It's the stupider he got, the better he got at banjo.
Yeah, maybe that's the way it works. He's fucking drooling and seizing, but he's just like.
Yeah, he ended up getting sent to the medical wing of Alcatraz for the last year or so of his sentence. He spent 8 years in total. When he got out, he was a shell of a man. He was prone to violent outbreaks, and he had dementia. Capone was said to have the mental capacity of a 13-year-old when he was released. When he got out of prison in January 1939, he moved back to Miami with Mae.
And he gets to be 13 again?
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome.
Is it?
Yeah, dude. Like, you get out of jail, you
For
go
everyone
back with
but you, it sucks, though.
Nah, because then, like, you can just, like, fucking read comics and watch cartoons and jerk off all the time. And
What's the difference between 30-year-old fucking RJ and 13-year-old RJ then?
oh, I don't get to do that, dude. I don't have time for that shit.
I don't have time for comic books.
No, or jerking off.
Yeah, he gets out of prison January 1939. He moves back to Miami. Mae watched the love of her life deteriorate more and more as the years went. Sonny at this time had his own kids, and Al wasn't always having violent outbursts. He loved hanging out with his grandkids, swimming in his giant pool.
Yeah, they probably shared similar interests.
They definitely did. There's two stories about Al in his later years that are absolutely not true. The first one was that Al was so messed up that he would get up in the middle of the night and he would be found in his PJs fishing in his giant pool in the backyard, which never happened, not once. Yeah, Al deteriorated more and more up until his eventual death, but he never got to that point per se. But from time to time, he would just have conversations with people that he had killed over the years, though. Like, he would do that. He'd be like, "Oh, I had to kill you, man. I'm sorry. It wasn't my fault." And people would just catch him like, "What is he talking about?" It's like, "Oh, old, like, big bones Johnny that he had to shoot in 1925. He's talking to him again." So he'd do shit like that, but you'd forget where he was. He never got up in the middle of the night, though, and fished in his fucking pool.
Yeah, they just covered that up. I bet he was shitting in the pool or something.
Could be. I really no point. You know, like, what would be the point in hiding all that?
I don't know, like, keep up his legacy.
Of being like a fucking
Shame.
asshole murderer. Like,
Yeah, dude, like, that's because like that's kind of cool if you're, like, if you're dumb, like a lot of people were, like, and are about that kind of shit. Like, he's like tough macho guy. I mean, that's very embarrassing to be caught in the middle of the night, taking a dump in your in-ground swimming pool. Or like trying to like,
he had the dementia. Like, he could have done it. I don't know. He was like, forget where he was. People try to say, "Hey, Al, you're fucking lost. You're shitting in a pool," and he'd freak out on them. He'd have violent outbursts all the time.
He'd be like, "I'm Snorky," while he's masturbating in public.
I'm reading my Superman comic and jerking off.
Yeah,
Mae really never brought him out of the house too much. He stayed at home for the later part of his life.
good reasons.
Yeah. The second rumor that I wanted to dispel is one I don't really want to, but I only want to because it's fun to do it. But it's a very wholesome one that people make a very wholesome picture from Al Capone from this. The rumor is that Al Capone used to dress up as Santa every Christmas and give presents to the kids. It's not true. He couldn't be around people too much. He would freak out. So he never actually was nice and gave out presents. That never happened.
They tried once. And he just came out, fucking beard suffocating him, going like, Fucking all the kids crying.
Yeah, they
With
went on.
scars on his face.
They went on and on about Al's later life, about like how he was kind of sad and blah blah blah. I don't really care. It's boring. He just deteriorated. He was like, by the end of his life, he's like a 9-year-old brain, and he just dies one day of a stroke, January 21st, 1947. Mae was by his side. He was just after his 48th birthday, a couple days after his 48th birthday.
That's pretty young.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
He got $600 a month from the mob to live out the rest of his years. The outfit also paid for his and his mother's house, or his Mae's house, sorry. And after his death, the family fended for himself and were mostly out of the outfit. The gangsters would typically take care of widows, but not children. So Sonny was out of the will, but Mae was taken care of for the rest of her life. Al's mother outlived him. She died years later. Ralph and Mae both lived into their old age. But he seemed to like have like a good life really after prison. He just wasn't all there anymore, but he had everything he wanted. A house in Miami, nice grandkids coming over all the time, just jerking off, reading comic books and shitting in pools. It seemed like
Fuck yeah.
pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, so here's my question for this entire thing for you guys. Capone had it much better than anything Eliot Ness had at the end of his life, only 9 short years later. So really the question is, does crime pay? Like, Eliot Ness was trying to be a goody two shoes his whole life, died a drunk asshole, nobody liked him, burnt in a left in like a shoebox in a closet for like 30 years, forgotten about. Al Capone still talked about to this day. And Eliot Ness wouldn't even be famous if it wasn't for Al Capone.
Right. Yeah. No. It absolutely does, because that's why like there's no like the mob in like organized crime doesn't exist anymore, because people in power stole that idea and figured out a legal means of doing it.
For sure.
Like
For
literally any government body or corporation has tactics and pretty much ideals identical to shit that these guys did back in the day.
That's what I'm saying. He studied in Harvard Law School about how he structured his business and how like money
Yeah,
was
because they're like,
distributed.
you want to be a congressman? This is how you be one.
That's really the story of Al Capone. I gave you what I like. There's so much on Al Capone, like so much, probably 30 books, you know, and I could have went on and on. I just gave you the stuff I thought was most fun about his life. And yeah, I think crime pays. I think especially in 1928, I would have not fuck being a lawman. Go out and fucking take your money, shake down the vendors, you know, you spend a couple years in jail. Sure. Just maybe go get the antibiotics to get the, here's another thing I didn't tell you. In his later life, antibiotics were like normal by then, normalized, and they kept shooting him with like high doses of antibiotics, and it just didn't work. They just kept trying. May just kept giving him more and
progressed.
more.
Yeah.
But they didn't know. They didn't know back then about like you getting built up resistance to antibiotics.
It wasn't that. It was just too far in. Like they couldn't get. They couldn't. It was just too far gone. He was too far gone. So, any questions about Al Capone? Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. I think that was all the stories.
Are you gonna play that song? I sent it to you on Facebook.
All right, cool.
This is, what's the band called again?
Southside Rippers?
Southside Rippers.
I don't know if that's the band or that's just the name of the song. I want to say the name of the
name of the band is Parental Advisory Explicit Content.
Is Repose.
Just let me
I don't think it's a band. I think it's just one individual. Just a guess.
All right, Southside Ripper, produced by Justin Bugatti. Just Bugatti. That's what the guy's name is. Just Bugatti.
I don't think that's the guy's name. I think his name is Repose.
Oh, Repose.
I think the guy who produced it is just Bugatti. The guy who you're about to hear is Repose.
You can't freely share our fame with these people. They haven't even proven themselves.
I mean, this guy has three likes on this song. It can't be that bad.
I'm not gonna lie. I love random shit like this. So yes, we will share everything we can. This is terrible. The beat's about to kick. I'm gonna tell you when. 3, 2.
That's not the beat. That's him
Why?
coming in.
Rocking Nike camo shorts, check like Newport. I don't smoke, can't take you serious.
No.
If you are a joke, ha. Dude, I'm going fast. You still trailing in the back, yeah. With a slow poke, don't ever
RJ
give a
just
sleeping
left.
grizzly a slow poke. Driving in a black sedan.
That's for Al. Big Al.
Fedora, trench coat, flashlight, and
This one goes up to Al.
Reaping, so you better run. Never outside to see the morning sun. Best to keep a gun, but self-defense don't really need shit if you aren't skilled. Don't want to get killed. Yeah, don't want to get
I just watched Private Dicks and I think RJ's the funniest.
What? Come on.